Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Jess Higgins Kelley is an internationally recognized nutrition therapist, journalist, and health educator. She is the co-author of two best-selling books, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, Integrating Deep Nutrition, the Ketogenic Diet, and Nontoxic Bio-Individualized Therapies, and Bioregulatory Medicine, an innovative holistic approach to self-healing. After a decade of private nutrition practice, Jess founded and is the current director of the Oncology Nutrition Institute, which provides global online certification programs for qualified practitioners in the field of integrative metabolic oncology nutritional therapy. She holds a bachelor's in journalism from Western Colorado University and has written health and nutrition articles for a variety of local and national publications, as well as serving as the managing editor of Edible Southwest magazine. Jess has appeared on dozens of podcasts, summits, and documentaries, and is considered one of the trailblazers in the field of metabolic oncology nutrition therapy. In her free time, Jess also enjoys trail running, skiing, surfing, sailing, doing yoga, gardening, or spending time with her family. Jess, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thanks, Casey. It is an honor to be here. And among all the incredible guests you've had, I've already learned so much from your podcast already.
Well, that is very sweet. We've been so fortunate to talk with many of our mutual friends, people in the industry, Dr. Thomas Seyfried, Travis Christofferson, Brad and Maggie, who we both absolutely love, some of the sweetest people and doing amazing work in this field of cancer oncology and dealing with it as a metabolic disease. So it's a really cool field and very inspirational to learn from all of you. You're all just like all of my favorite people.
Thank you. It's been fun to be part of this growing awareness around metabolic dietary therapies and how they can really have a positive influence on quality of life, quantity of life, and people who just aren't getting that from conventional oncology. So it's been fun to see it grow and spread and get validated in research.
Yeah, definitely. And you and I were talking offline and on the one hand, saying how cool it is that this message is getting out, but also lamenting the fact that the way that it's getting out is like on the ground. It's people looking up podcasts and finding these summits. It's not necessarily like the mainstream kind of message that we're hearing. And so it's so optimistic that we're getting the message out, but at the same time, it's like, wow, we still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, gotta just keep moving forward. And I always say, if the message helps one single person to not experience a cancer process, if we can nip it in the bud and get to someone before they have to go through it, then my career's been a success. So, and then it spreads, and it does. And one person tells the next person, hey, this is what I did, and word of mouth is pretty powerful. And so, grassroots efforts can certainly, go far.
Yeah, exactly. I think back to my mom. I know you lost your dad to cancer, so I'm very sorry for that. And, my mom was diagnosed basically at my age. She was 38, 39, diagnosed. She had all the treatments 7 years before she passed in 2006. And it's like looking back, like maybe it wasn't the best thing for me to bring her the giant like apple cider drinks pumped with sugar from Starbucks to her chemo treatments. Like that's not great. Not great.
We all can look back with 2020 vision and say, I wish I knew more at the time. And, we can't do that to ourselves because you were trying. And, at the time that my dad got diagnosed with glioblastoma, I mean, we were just sort of at the beginning of learning about ketogen. I mean, we've known about it obviously for a long time in the work with epilepsy at the turn of the century, but I wish I had known more where we are today, and there's more we could have done. But yeah, you take the pressure off, let it go.
Yeah, exactly. And just move forward and try to help people. We did change our diet at the time. Like the white bread was gone, the wheat bread replaced it. We skim milk in the house, and I can't believe it's not butter. Like we changed.
Yes. Yeah. And every step is every bite is a positive step in the right direction. If you're making those changes, it's good. And 7 years is a pretty good run. I'm sure it's really hard on you. It's often the hardest on the caregivers, and they really take on a lot. And I think it would be nice to have more support for caregivers. There's estimates that caregivers do end up get diagnosed with cancer down the line, associated with stress and letting their own health goals go and routines and all that. So it affects not only the person who gets diagnosed, but everybody in their immediate
Yep.
circles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really, really good point about the caregivers. I love that. You are a person that loves the outdoors, so you at least spent a lot of your time in southwestern Colorado. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. I was in the Silverton, Colorado for quite some time. It's just sort of nestled between Telluride and Durango. It's about 9,000 feet. I worked for an extreme ski area there for several years and was really involved in the ski industry, extreme skiing, and taught for Outward Bound for a number of years in Maine. So outdoor leadership, survival, those courses were great. You know, one element of teaching Outward Bound is dropping students off and having them do a solo, where a lot of times they would do some fasting. And you know, just outdoor adventure sports, I think, is really a great tool. You know, we talk a lot about diet, but I'm also really big on the lifestyle front, you know, exercise, and that's huge, and it gets dropped or just not talked about enough as I feel like it should be. So yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And speaking of extreme skiing, man, Telluride is steep, 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 steep. And I have to say, the first time I rounded the corner on the road to go to the Blues and Brews Festival in Telluride almost a decade ago, literally, as you're coming up to Telluride, it takes your breath away. It is so incredibly gorgeous. It is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's breathtaking for sure. Those are some amazing mountains.
Yeah, very breathtaking. I say that for two reasons. One, so that people know how beautiful an area that is in the world. And two, so that people know that there's nothing to see here in Utah. Go to Colorado. I always try to encourage people to get out of here, stop moving here. We're way too busy. Go check out Colorado and Telluride. And it's beautiful there, which it is.
Yeah, you know, it's ultimately why I ended up leaving Colorado. I lived there for on and off for about 20 years, and it, you know, overpopulation, but certainly the West with all the water situation, and ended up moving back to Maine, which is you know, as far as food goes, we have clean water, we have lots of trees, we've got, you know, wonderful growing season here, so we're able to grow a lot more food. We've got a botanical garden going here at the school, and it's more of a food mecca. I love outdoor sports in the West, but Colorado got taken over a bit by California, so I was fine to leave.
It's starting to happen here as well. One of my really good friends, he grew up in Maine as well and learned how to telemark ski there. And then he moved to Telluride, and he was like, skiing here is a piece of cake. You're in like powdery goodness, where Maine, it's like a sheet of ice.
Yeah. Yeah. If you learn how to ski in Maine, you can pretty much ski anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So you've lived tons of lives, extreme sports. You were a sea captain, apparently. You went to journalism. You got your bachelor's in journalism. Tell us how you got interested in this kind of metabolic approach to cancer with all these other things going on.
Yeah. Well, you know, I had always really been interested in health and healing. And I think probably, you know, the trail started when I was a kid. I won't make this super long, but you know, my dad was a respiratory therapist, and he did quite a bit of home healthcare. So I used to drive around with him in the van filled with all these oxygen tanks and go into people's houses, where he'd get them all hooked up to oxygen tanks, and you know, there they are still smoking. And it really provided like this profound insight into addiction, and sort of served to pique my curiosity later on into how powerful sugar and food and all kinds of addictions are, you know, for me down the road. So you know, after spending several years in the outdoor industry and journalism, and you know, working for Outward Bound and writing for outdoor publications, I decided I should do a little more with my life. And so I graduated as a master nutrition therapist in 2010. And I went into sort of what I called a family practice, nutrition practice. And it was great. I saw all ages, all conditions, all different types of, you know, anything from weight loss to autoimmune to digestion to all sorts of different things. And it was great. It was such a good education, so much experience. And you know, that had the journalism background really helped, because you have to ask your clients some of these tough questions. You know, we always joke that nutrition therapy is really 90% therapy, and it is, because you have to talk to your clients about early childhood trauma and stress and a lot of these uncomfortable things that, you know, served well for me to kind of dig in as, you know, I sort of felt as though I was a detective, trying to figure out some of these health history things that contributed to people's different imbalances. So anyway, I was really lucky enough at the time to work in a clinic in Durango, Colorado with Dr. Nasha Winters and my other colleague, Dr. Kristen West. And there's some other really great stuff. We had a fabulous team. We're doing some really cutting edge stuff with the oncology population, doing some fun retreats. And that was where I really started learning about metabolic dietary therapies. It was somewhere around 2013 that Nasha and I decided to write the Metabolic Approach to Cancer book. And, we weren't sure at the time if it was going to be well received. I've been doing this for a long time. And at the beginning, talking about cancer in the nutrition world was absolutely taboo. I taught clinical nutrition for years for the Nutrition Therapy Institute in Denver. And it was, we didn't talk about cancer. It was off limits. So, the journalist in me was like, let's get this story out there. People need to know because the research is there. So, we were lucky enough to, sign on with a publisher, got the book advanced, got deadlines, here we go. And then, smack in the middle of writing it, my dad got diagnosed with glioblastoma, which is the most aggressive form of brain cancer. And so then the content of the book got really real. All of a sudden it was like, wow, I got to be on the patient side and see what it was really like, to go through it on, through the conventional medicine system, the challenges that people have when they're navigating this process. And so, I was always the black sheep in my family, pretty Western medicine family. And so, at the time we're like, hey, you should do the ketogenic diet. My family's like, what about the cholesterol? And I'm like, he's gonna be dead. Come on, let's, so we've come so far. Like we're talking about, just if I knew what I knew then, we could have done a lot more. But so anyway, he did pass on 7 months before the book was published, despite, doing the ketogenic diet, amongst several other tumor treating fields and all these different things. And so Nasha and I did dedicate the book to him. Definitely learned a lot. You learn a lot when you go through it yourself. It's different when you're on the outside, but that really did help to inspire a lot of the dedication to researching and writing the book. And so, and then at the same time writing the book, I was like, hey, let's develop an education program out of this. Like, I'm one practitioner. Let's teach other practitioners out there to help get the word out. And so ended up sort of as an offshoot of the book, building out this 40-week program, which is an oncology nutrition consulting certification program that I founded in 2017. And we're training practitioners globally today. And it's great. And, little adrenal fatigue later, but here we are. It's a great journey, highs and lows.
That's really amazing. I'm sure your father's very, very proud of you. So sorry for your loss. And, glioblastoma is just a really, really tough one. Do you believe that any of the therapies that you used with him, including a ketogenic diet, do you think they prolonged his life or improved the quality of his life? I know it's speculation. I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's speculation, but we also saw that. So for a long time, his scans were clear when he was doing the ketogenic diet. And that's really encouraging. There's so much scan anxiety when you go in to see, if anything's grown. And then he did go on to Avastin and had some digestive issues, at which time he was advised to follow the BRAT diet, which has since been totally debunked. And then once he went back on that rice applesauce diet, his tumor did reappear pretty quickly after that. So we do have scans to show that. And as far as quality of life goes, he made a lot of changes, and he said, I feel better now than before I got cancer. He was exercising, he was sleeping, he quit drinking, he quit going to McDonald's drive-through, some of that low-hanging fruit stuff that, he felt good, and he was able to have good quality of life. And that's what we're really going for. We want people to feel good while they're going through these standard of care treatments instead of throwing up in the bathroom. So it was encouraging. And the other thing that happened, coming from me, my family didn't really accept the ketogenic diet, but he was able to connect with a neuro-oncologist from Mass General, and he was like, hey, have you ever heard of the ketogenic diet? And this incredible oncologist, who's one of our advisory board members now, said, oh yeah, I've heard of it. And you can have your life in one hand or a cookie in the other. And then everyone was like, the ketogenic diet's the greatest idea ever. I'm like, sure. Okay. If a male medical doctor says it, cool. Then everyone's on board. So that was fine. And it was embraced. And I was glad to have that, that's what it was going to take to get it, my family on board. And I don't really care who said it, but, he dove right in, and that was great. So I think that did make a big difference. And
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. What the diet you mentioned, the brat diet?
Brat, bananas, rice, applesauce, and toast. They've been recommending it for years for pediatric diarrhea and other people who get just digestive upset. And it's actually it's no longer recommended. And it's one of the dietary theories. I wish that oncologists and pediatricians and other providers would stay up on some of this, because it's nutrient depleted and it really doesn't help with the diarrhea. But unfortunately, people who went through, most doctors don't get any nutrition education, but some things we've heard of, like, okay, maybe this dietary therapy will work. And unfortunately it backfires. Like we were talking about earlier, things change pretty rapidly. So we have to be careful. I sort of joke, and I probably shouldn't say this, but everyone gets so mad at nutrition therapists to say, hey, you can't say this and you can't say that, and you have to be really careful about what you say. But then you got doctors giving information. It's malpractice. It would be malpractice if you don't know what you're talking about. You shouldn't be giving dietary advice. And I just think that it's worth just saying, hey, I don't know, maybe you should connect with an oncology nutrition consultant, or someone who's savvy in some of these things. So yeah, the brat diet is one of the ones that we cover being debunked a while ago.
Never heard of that. Never heard of that.
Oh, the brat diet. Yeah, it's been around for quite some time.
Wow. I mean, obviously you could only do that temporarily, because you would become very malnourished and very insulin resistant pretty quick.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Very interesting. Yeah, I've never heard of that. Okay, so you and I both, have listened to a recent podcast. It's a very popular podcast. Most people would know it. The episode is all about one specific topic of one particular kind of cancer. And the episode went through all the different treatments, what the cancer is, how it mutates, whatever. They acknowledged pretty early on in that episode that there was a study done, a cohort of Japanese people. They were in Japan and didn't get a lot of cancer. They moved to America and got a lot of cancer. It was observational more than likely, but it was telling a story. And they said, like, this is obviously environmental. They proceeded to do this entire episode that's 2 hours long that doesn't say anything really that much about the environment. And it's so frustrating, because it was all about which radiation is best, which chemotherapy is best, what medications are better. And they're talking about progress. Like, we are progressing in certain particular types of cancer, and we're getting better survival rates. I just don't understand when they're talking about like how to like mop up extra cancer cells that might be rogue in the body. Why are people not talking about metabolic approaches to cancer that could, at the very least, be extremely helpful?
Well, that's the $1 million question. And I think it does come down to millions of dollars, because, there's just not a lot of money in dietary therapies and, eating organic food and those kind of things. So unfortunately, it does get left out of the conversation when there's just so many other low-hanging fruit that we can focus on. I mean, it was the World Cancer Research Fund estimated in 2019 that almost half of all cancers can be prevented by lifestyle and dietary measures alone, and yet they get completely left off the table. So estimates are that 1 in 3 people will ask their doctor, hey, or their oncologist, like when they just get diagnosed, hey, what about nutrition? And the most common answer is, it doesn't matter what you eat, just don't lose weight. And that has to change. So we can definitely do better than that. We know that it's been identified. The dietary factors that increase cancer risk include things like consumption of excess calories and obesity. And, the numbers now are absolutely startling. Something like 85% of Americans are metabolically inflexible. We're overweight. People are overweight, they're obese. I mean, it's one of those things that, we could simply say, one of the first things we have our students do as an exercise is, hey, just track your diet for 3 days. I think this is such a powerful exercise because so many people will say, oh, I thought I was eating so healthy, and then I got diagnosed. But until you call a little awareness to it, most people have no idea how many calories, how much sugar they're eating on a daily basis. So, just as a starting point, we talked earlier about just really wanting to focus on solutions. What can people do now? Where can you start today? I have spent so many years with the people coming in the door going, I have stage 4 cancer. It's metastasized. And my doctor basically sent me out to pasture. And now I'm here to see you. And it's like, we're late. We're late. We need to catch these folks upstream before this process begins to happen. And so, just being aware of what's going on, is that self-awareness is huge. And just, we're overeating. We're eating too much sugar. We're not eating enough fiber. There's a whole host of different dietary factors that can contribute to risk.
Yeah, I don't know if they're as popular in Maine as they are around here, but soda shops around here are super popular. So giant sodas with added whatever flavorings you can get, syrups and different things added to them. And then very popular also are big old cookies. And I saw one of these cookies, and they're massive. Yeah. And you can Google it. They're the most popular. Like if you look at the times that they're open, it shows you when it's most popular. And the peak popularity is like 3 p.m. and like 8 p.m., presumably like 2 or 3 hours after somebody had a lunch. And they're probably starving because they probably ate the wrong things, didn't get enough protein. They're very hungry at those times. But anyway, I see a package for one of these cookies and it goes through all the, ingredients and the nutrition facts and everything. And it was like 35, 40 grams of sugar, but the serving size was a quarter of the cookie. Who eats a quarter of a cookie?
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Well, and I said this when we were talking offline, is, we just had Halloween, and that I have been on a personal crusade about Halloween for many years. So it is a legal form of drug dealing. So I heard that a local fire station was handing out king size servings of candy to kids, king size, and recommending that they take more than one. I mean, what came home after an hour of going to drug dealers' house? And I have to put it this way because that's what it is, because the studies have shown that sugar is more appealing than cocaine in rodent models. So when we have our kids going around getting cocaine dropped in a basket for free, it's horrifying. It should be absolutely illegal. And then we get these kids they're hooked on drugs. They're hooked on drugs because sugar is a drug, and we start them young, and then it keeps going from there. And the serving sizes are huge. I mean, that's more sugar than our ancestors would have consumed in a whole year.
Oh, easily.
One night. Yeah.
That's crazy. And it's sad to think that unless the firefighters paid for it themselves, it probably came out of the taxpayers' dollar anyway.
Yeah, I know. That's another story.
So stupid. Okay. So you described writing about this about a decade ago. This is coming to your awareness. So tell us a little bit about like the what is a metabolic approach to treating cancer, and tell us why it wasn't just a decade ago that we knew about this stuff. Like this isn't a new idea that we've just had.
Yeah, it's not new. And, of course, the work of Dr. Otto Warburg that, was happening in the early 19th century, showing that essentially cancer is a metabolic disease. It has altered metabolism. And then fortunately, that idea was really risen from the grave by the work of Dr. Thomas Seyfried, in the last 15 years. Has really showed us that, that's one piece of the puzzle. And what we talked about in the book is, one of the most common things that people hear is, they'll ask their oncologist, well, what caused it? And the typical answer is just bad luck. or it's genetics. But unfortunately, we know that genetics are only cause of about 5 to 10% of all cancers. They're viral causes of cancer. But, when we started digging into all these different systems and all these different areas of your terrain, what we identified is, 10 different areas of places for people to sort of do a little self-assessment and realize, like, wow, these aha moments. So, dysregulated blood sugar and insulin resistance and metabolic disorders certainly being one of them. As far as toxicity causing cancer, we learned about this back with chimney sweep cancer, back a couple hundred years ago, when these poor kids were getting shoved down these chimneys to sweep out the chimneys, and they were getting scrotal cancer. We've known the role of toxins in cancer for a long time. The microbiome, this is, sort of new, but that was one of the other areas of the terrain that it's like, I was just reading that medical error is the third leading cause of death. And I just don't know how many different, like, oopsies, we got that one wrong, are we going to have before we're like, we need to have a little bit of a trust issue here. So antibiotics being one of them. So, the amount of antibiotics that kids are exposed to, cancer prevention starts at birth, and it needs to start at birth, because that's when nutrition, our terrain begins to get fortified. And the amount of antibiotics that these kids are put on for ear infections or, different things that haven't really been identified, all of a sudden 90% of your immune system's in your gut, and then that gets wiped out. I mean, so there's so many different things to kind of look at. And that's why a really good health history is so important when you're working with someone. One of the things that I've found over the years working with people, and this is another good idea for your listeners to sort of do at home, is to do, a bit of a health history journal, a little bit, a timeline, like, what happened when you were younger, because people dismiss early childhood trauma, which we know now plays a huge role in, the etiology of some cancers. And so, what drugs were they on? What antibiotics? What stressors did they have, emotional or physical? There's so many different factors that they say most cancers take, 10, 20, 30 years to kind of show up. So looking back of like, wow, okay, well, I can sort of see. And another powerful question that we ask people is, what do you think contributed to your cancer? So much in allopathic medicine, you take the responsibility off the person. They get treatments done to them, chemotherapy or radiation or whatever. And we have an intrinsic ability to heal from within, but people have sort of given their own ability to think for themselves, heal for themselves off. And, it's pretty powerful, because some people, will say, geez, I think it was that early childhood sexual abuse. I think that's what caused my cancer. And you're like, well, bingo, let's focus on that. What do you think did it? And so really putting the power back to the patient, back to the person, so that they can, I'm not saying allopathic medicine is bad, not to do those. We want to kind of complement it. And so we can all, rising tides lift all ships. So let's all do it better. But getting people to have a little bit of ownership over their process and digging into these diet and lifestyles, which is, hard, which I hate hearing that, like, but that's where the best outcomes happen. You've probably seen it. The people that really dig in and make the most changes, they have the best outcomes. And that's exciting to see.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's like my favorite saying goes, when pain increases, hearing improves. And so unless it sucks bad enough, you won't be willing to give up, those sugar cookies and the big bucket of soda at the store. So it's tough. But I love the way you guys describe it as a terrain, and everything that you were just explaining. If somebody wants to experience even a little bit of that, you integrated a lot of those things, like past childhood traumas, relationship with parents, into your quiz on your website, which I'm in the middle of right now. Really, really helpful. It's a really cool way to kind of assess what's going on and where you can kind of focus your attention.
Yeah, that was sort of fun. I was like, everyone loves a good Cosmo quiz. Let's chuck it at the beginning. And so we kind of went through and brainstormed questions for each of the 10 terrain areas. And it's really nice, sort of an at-home quiz that people can do to be like, bingo, wow, I was exposed to a lot of toxins, or wow, my hormones have always been off. I've had altered periods or lots of cramps or, these different things, or wow, digestion issues or mental emotion, or biorhythms. Wow, I was a night shift worker for 15 years, so those questions are designed for people to go, oh, maybe it's not bad luck, because there's all research here to show that these things, don't cause it, but they can contribute to a process. There's a lot of snowflakes in a snowball to get it going. So yeah, the quiz is fun.
Yeah, I love it. It was really, really helpful. I really enjoyed that.
Oh,
Okay, so we know there's lots of different factors to this, and I love that. If we could, can we go back to Otto Warburg? His story is absolutely fascinating. If for the listener, go pick up Ravenous by Sam Apple. We've had him on the show as well. You can look up that episode we did with him. He talks about the history of Otto Warburg. Why was it so important that the Nazis kept this one most likely homosexual Jewish dude alive in Germany during World War II? What were his discoveries?
Yeah, really fascinating. And just to sort of distill it into a bouillon cube for the masses, basically what he discovered in his experiments is that cancer cells create energy in a different way than healthy cells. So healthy cells, they like to breathe, they like to respirate, they're like you and I, they breathe. Cancer cells, they like to ferment. So they're like, even if oxygen's here, it's like they're like little yogurts. They're like, without oxygen, they choose to use a fermentation process to create molecules of ATP, which is energy, and they create less, but they do it via this antiquated pathway that was very unique. And so by being able to identify this altered metabolism of cancer cells, it allowed a focus on targeting that metabolism. So that was what was really interesting about Otto Warburg's work. Instead of, being a genetic, there's definitely mitochondrial damage there that can contribute to it. But basically, it's that cancer cells produce energy in a different way than healthy cells. And that was a big discovery and a revolutionary finding, and one that was definitely quieted down for quite some time with the discovery of DNA by Francis and Crick in the 50s. And that was like, ooh, let's go down this path instead. And it got shoved under the carpet. And fortunately, it's resurfaced again. And it's, got a lot of interest.
Yeah, that is super interesting. So related to what you've mentioned already, a ketogenic diet, in what way does a ketogenic diet potentially help, or in some cases, maybe even, I don't want to go as far as saying prevent, but maybe like at least kick that can down the road a little while longer?
Right. So, what I like to say about the ketogenic diet, and we have to quantify it, because so many people get stuck on being like, it's not a cure. It's not a cure. It's I like to think of a ketogenic diet as a destabilizing agent. So if cancer cells, they're hungry, right? They want to multiply. That's one of their hallmarks, is just rapid growth. And in order to grow like a teenage boy, they need lots of food. I like to use that analogy. So they're like, feed me, feed me, feed me. And a really easy fuel source is glucose. So cancer cells are like, ooh, let's rev up our rate of glycolysis so we can consume more glucose so we can grow and spread. So a ketogenic diet, as opposed to using having glucose as a fuel source, your body, which incredibly produces ketones. So ketones produced in the liver, this has been, if our bodies didn't produce ketones, we would have been dead as a race a long time ago, because we had experienced many times where there was scarcity of food. So you're running on ketones, and the cancer cells are like, I can't use you as well as glucose. So their energy production is going to decline. So it's like, you're standing on 2 feet and you're ready to fight. Ketogenic diet, I like to say, it puts cancer cells on 1 foot. So some of these other therapeutic elements can come in, be it chemo or radiation or some of these other things. Research has shown that ketogenic diet in tandem with radiation or certain chemotherapies improves. The two together are synergistic. So cancer cells, they don't do as well on a ketogenic diet. They're a bit starved for energy, and so they're not able to grow as fast. So that's
Interesting.
Yeah, bit of a
Yeah.
destabilizer. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. That's a great way to think about it. And we just interviewed Dom D'Agostino, and I meant to ask him a follow-up question about this, because I heard it, but it didn't sink in, and the topic kind of passed, and I forgot to ask him again. But he was mentioning that when he was putting cancer cells in like a petri dish with beta hydroxybutyrate, one of the ketones that we produce, he said that was actively bad for the cancer cells, if I understood it correctly. So could it be that reducing the glucose in our diet and going on a ketogenic could be beneficial, not only because it reduces the glucose in our body, but also because it regulates the ketones? Could it be directionally both ways correct from what you understand?
Well, absolutely. So, ketogenic diet is a really powerful tool that humans have been cycling in and out of ketosis for millions of years. So, there is a reason that we have this ancient biological pathway. And the fact that in our modern lifestyle, it is not utilized at all. In fact, it's completely squished with our high glucose diets. So from a prevention standpoint, and we see this, right? So we see this in neurological conditions. We see this, improvement in Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and of course in seizures and anything to do with the brain. It makes sense. So when you're in ketosis, anecdotal reports, and we've seen it too, your focus increases, your energy increases, you're looking for food, so your body, your all of your processes improve. So should a person be on a ketogenic diet forever? Not necessarily, unless they have brain cancer, or chronic epilepsy, or whatever. But yeah, it's protective, it's neuroprotective. These ketones are good. And what's really fascinating is there's some evidence that shows that the master fuel sensors will shift. So traditionally our bodies in the winter time had food scarcity, and we were designed to have less food. The February moon is the hunger moon. There was food scarcity. We were in ketosis in the winter time, and now, instead of being in ketosis in the winter, we are shoving ourselves full of Christmas candy. So we're mismatching our biological tendencies, and some of these growth promoters and factors are getting a mixed message, when we really should be, I say for prevention, with our students, ketogenic diet, fasting more so in the winter. Summertime, just look at your garden. There's more carbohydrates in my garden in the summertime. That's a time when your body's supposed to build and grow like a plant. We're biological beings. So I don't know if that answers your question. I'm not a scientist or a clinical researcher, so I can't really comment to what happens in the petri dish. But I do know that there's a reason that there's these ancient pathways in our body, and they are extremely neuroprotective.
Yeah, no, that's so well said. And you're right. Like, you could have a majority of people out there not even getting into ketosis, at any point in their life if they've been fed the wrong things. And it's sad. And you talked about the seasonality and the hunger. I think that's super important. I'll give you a bit of an example. I'm going to get some hate mail from my carnivore people on this one, and that's okay. So people in my neighborhood, they have gardens that they grow in like kind of public areas, but some people abandon them. So they plant things, but the weeds take over, and all these tomatoes like go to waste. So every now and again, if one is ripe, like I'll just walk by and like grab one, or I've been putting some in like in like cottage cheese at night. They're absolutely delicious. Like store-bought tomatoes suck. Garden tomatoes are amazing. No comparison.
Totally.
Well, guess.
Sorry if I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is the other thing that we're seeing, where we're getting people afraid of some plants, and that's really dangerous. So, for example, there are certain types of plant families that have very powerful anti-cancer. Tomatoes, for example, cooked tomatoes are extremely high in lycopene, which has been shown in several studies to be very protective, supportive of prostate cancer. So there's nutrient density in these plant foods, not only micronutrients, but phytonutrients. If you look at the allium family of garlic and onions and shallots and chives, my goodness, I mean, garlic has been found to be 40 times more powerful than penicillin. I have to caution, these extremes of like, no plants. I mean, give me a break. Come on, we need these plants. They balance each other out. So I'm all for a balanced diet of some phytonutrient rich carbohydrate plants. Now, the plants that we should be thinking about is like whole wheat, wheat is a plant. However, it's coated in modern wheat's coated in glyphosate and processed and then enriched with vitamins that should have been there in the first place. And they're just super toxic, you know? So I think we really need to be careful what kind of nutrition message is getting out there. And I personally am getting really, really concerned with these big voices out there, getting people afraid of plants, because when you work with this population, if I get someone who walks through the door and they're afraid of an apple, we have a problem. So look, we've got bigger fish to fry than a tomato. Give me a break. I don't care about, if you're eating a good dark cherry tomato rich in lycopene, not my concern. If you're eating some delicious Brussels sprouts that is going to help your microbiome to process extra estrogens, please do. So this plant fear and creating food fear in the people out there is really backfiring for us in the field, when you have people walking in the door and they're afraid of nutrient dense vegetables. And so hopefully that gets out, because it's not good. It's dangerous.
You know what? I actually really love that. I've done the carnivore diet for 4.5 years. It works well for me. I like it. I include other things from time to time, and it's not a big deal. But like, I look at my clients, like a very small percentage of them can or even should do a carnivore diet. I don't recommend that everybody do a carnivore diet. Like, I tell people my job, as a carnivore coach, is to be at the sales table of a Ford dealership. I'm not yelling at everybody who drives Chevys or Volkswagens to tell them that they're terrible. I'm just here to help if you want to try this one way. And so when I hear you and some of your content, you're describing some of these foods, the garlic, I know you're a huge fan of, and having some of these, foods. I don't have many, but would you be concerned with somebody like myself who's been carnivore for a while and at least, say my definition of carnivore, which is like 75% of animal-based foods or greater, would you be concerned that I'm missing out by not including some of those foods in my diet?
Yeah, great. Well, the first place I would start, not that there's anything wrong with it, and what I really do want to put out there, that everything should be bio-individualized. So it is the person, it's not the protocol. So we get stuck in like, everyone should be keto, everyone should be plant-based, everyone should be. No, it depends on the person. I eat a high meat diet. So I'm O blood type. I am a recovering vegetarian. When I was vegetarian, I was so sick. So I do good with like lots of protein, and that's predominantly my diet. So, but what we have to talk about, for your audience, if they're high carnivore, number one is when you cook protein at high temperatures, it can create these HCAs, these cysteine, and sorry, late in the day, I can't pronounce anything, but toxic compounds get produced when you cook meat at high temperatures. So cool, groovy, eat meats, but one of our rules for eating meat in a healthy way is cook it low and slow. So for example, if you're going to eat fish, research has shown that if you cook, a beautiful piece of wild-caught salmon and you cook it over 275 degrees for longer than 20 minutes, you will destroy the omega-3 fatty acids, the EPA and the DHA. So you're like, cool, I have an awesome piece of salmon, I'll throw it on the grill, groovy, but we may be negating some of the beneficial fatty acids that are in it. So, cooking is really important. The way that you cook your protein is key. The second thing with looking at high protein diets, depending on, it can cause a bit of oxidation. So for some people who eat a lot of red meat, we want to take a look at lab tests like ferritin levels, which is an iron storage marker, because if that ferritin level is really high, that can cause oxidative stress. So we need to have a balance of antioxidants because, just walking around on a daily basis, we get exposed to a lot of things, toxins in the environment that cause oxidative stress, and oxidative stress is a contributor to imbalanced terrain. So while I'm definitely a big fan of eating lots of animal protein, also quantified that animal protein, the sourcing is imperative. So, they've done studies that have shown like a CAFO feedlot animal, I said in the book, they're like a four-legged Superfund site. No way, that's toxic. We don't want to eat that. But grass-fed, pasture-raised, regenerative farms, all that. They have higher content of omega-3 fatty acids, higher content of vitamin A. The nutrient profile is completely different. So the food quality conversation in high protein diets is critical. So cooking, food quality, and then just making sure that you're getting, a vast array of antioxidants to go along sort of with potentially any of the oxidative stress that's being caused from eating high protein. So those are some places I'd start.
That's so helpful. I love that. Thank you so much for being willing to address that. I was really hopeful that you would finally be the guest that would come on and say, I know the perfect diet, just eat this. And we would cancel the show and it would be over. You'd be the last guest ever. Damn. All right. We got to keep going. No, you're right. It's so tough. And the big thing that I think everybody's missing out on when they're saying, carnivore, plant-based, vegan, vegetarian, whatever, eliminate the processed foods. The ultra processed foods are the problem. You're right. Like apples never made anybody obese. I'm sorry. Like it's going to be okay if you have some plants here and there. If you need to cut them out, some people do, but it's not everybody that has these accumulation problems like oxalate. Some do, not everybody does. And so I think that's a really reasonable approach, and it helps us remember we're on the same team. Get rid of the processed foods, and we're going to be 99% there anyway.
Completely. And, I think it's important to be cross-referencing with some lab markers, So it's like you got to kind of work backwards from the person to develop the diet. So no two people that we work with are going to have the same diet. So, two 35-year-old women that walk in the door with, a stage 3 HER2 negative breast cancer could have two extremely different backgrounds and profiles that have gotten them to this point. So we have to work backwards. So one person, we may want to, and what I call it, it's systems-based plants, right? So if you can identify, hey, wow, my immune system runs pretty low, maybe the plants you should focus on are the mushroom family, the fungus, okay? Or the allium family, focus on those. Hey, if you've got hormonal issues, let's focus on the brassicas, the broccolis and the Brussels sprouts and those, because they've been found to really beneficially help to metabolize estrogens and improve the microbiome. So there's different plant families that we can sort of choose from to sort of address the bio-individual. And I think that that's a place for plants. Where do they need that? Are they low in folate? Maybe we're doing more dark leafy greens. I mean, let's look at, a bit of a plant prescription sort of depending on the person. And that I think is the place for plants.
Yeah, I love that. Very well explained. That's great. So somebody that's hearing you talk about protein, I totally agree. I think most people could do really well with protein, but there has been some controversial, I guess I'd say, kind of research about protein and mTOR being a growth factor that then could potentially cause cancer to grow. What's your response to that?
Yeah. So people like to isolate nutrients. And they've done so with amino acids. So and there's a good amount of research that's showing that amino acids like glutamine or glutamate can fuel specific types of cancer, specifically brain. So we're looking at some of these, one target, one inhibitor, one protein type approaches. And that's the exact opposite of what we're doing in a terrain-based approach. So if it was just one amino acid that's the cause of this whole cancer process, we would have cured cancer a long time ago. I feel like it's like, if you have kids, you're like, distraction is the best way to diffuse curiosity. You're like, no, look over there. Oh, look at that. Look at that. So it's like, so I think what we're getting so myopic in our view and wanting to isolate. And then people are like, oh my gosh, glutamine, everyone get glutamine out, stop eating grain. And you're like, well, maybe you could just try fasting for a day a week and that might do the trick. So we're getting people scared of then they're afraid to eat protein. Then we get all these plant-based diets, which is so dangerous, by the way. As a plant-based diet, totally vegan, no animal protein, is one of the most dangerous things out there we could do, for especially in a chronically ill population. There is some evidence that certain amino acids can, potentially drive certain types of cancers. But again, that's getting into one target, one molecule, one blockade. And, I think where the nutrition world can really step up. And what I hope to see as a growing trend is when someone walks in the door, let's run some nutrient tests on them. So instead of guessing, let's look. I mean, we run nutrient profiles on everybody, you know, and you're like, oh, look, right here, what do your amino acids look like? What are your, I have low chromium, for example. So chromium is a micronutrient directly involved in how you, glucose tolerance factor. I'm like, geez, who would have thought that? So I eat more broccoli. So you can start to customize dietary therapy based on testing instead of being like, just shooting in the dark. So we need to make nutrient assessments a bigger part of the standard of care. Vitamin D, I mean, come on, low-hanging fruit. Give me a break. 75% of people are deficient in it. Why aren't we testing? So if we're looking at amino acids as cancer drivers, test. Let's see, are your levels through the roof? I don't know, you know, let's see. Some people they are, some people don't, you know, there's genetic SNPs. We've come a long way in nutrigenomics, and we do nutrigenomic testing on folks because there's certain genes involved in protein metabolism. And we learned this early on with the ketogenic diet, by the way. You have someone who walks in the door and you're like, oh yeah, great, ketogenic diet, let's go. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, their cholesterol goes through the roof. Whoa, oh, you know, their hormones go through the roof. And it's like, what is going on? Well, some people can't process saturated fats as well because of different genetic predispositions. Some people, you know, you need to get them on a diet of more polyunsaturated or monounsaturated fats. You know, the same goes for different proteins. The same goes for plants. There's a genetic SNP that can, you know, interfere with the conversion of plant-based fatty acids like flax, which everyone's like, oh, eat more flax seeds. No. Some people have this BCOM1 SNP that inhibits the conversion to vitamin A, which is why we need animal proteins. So we need to be looking at nutrigenomics. We need to be doing nutrient testing so that we can properly assess these people and then create their protocols, you know, based on them. So
yeah,
we need to test.
nice. That's great. You were able to sneak in a parenting tip in there too, by the way. That was great.
Right? You like that?
That was
Don't
good.
push the button.
It's amazing. Good tip. I can remember that.
Yeah.
Okay, so with this type of testing, how do people access this? Is it cost prohibitive? Is it something that's easily accessible? Like how do we get to that?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And that's another one of my, you know, a lot of these modalities are available to people who have financial resources. And that's why, you know, I'd really like to reach all audiences because some people can't, a lot of this stuff, you have to pay for it out of pocket. We're not covered by insurance. Some HSA programs will reimburse for nutrition, but unless, you know, a doctor orders tests, which we've been fighting for years to get oncologists to tack on just basic tests, and some do and some don't. But we really need to get, you know, if your doctor orders it and it becomes part of the standard of care, then insurance covers it. If not, a lot of times ordering these tests is a pay out of pocket. So these nutrient tests, they run somewhere around, you know, depending on the test kit, let's just say 250, 300 US dollars. And so that's, you know, a lot of money for a lot of people, but that's some really valuable data. You know, for us doing nutrition therapy, like I said, for myself, seeing that I have low chromium, for example, and being like, wow, you know, that's going to really impact how my body uses glucose. I mean, that's good information. So we want to know where people are deficient. These B vitamins, you know, for example, and they're involved in, you know, methylation and these different things. Like you can get people to change a lot better, change their dietary therapies, you know, when they can see the data in front of them. And, you know, high animal protein diets, cool. Let's see what your protein levels look like. Let's keep an eye on your kidneys, you know, let's see what your creatinine and your blood urea nitrogen look like. Let's keep an eye on some of these markers so you can sort of see how it's working. And, you know, knowing that dietary therapy should change and adapt depending on seasons, life cycles, you know, shouldn't stay one way forever. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it is a lot of, it can be cost prohibitive for some people, but there are a lot of ways that you can walk into like a direct lab site and people can pay out of pocket and pick and choose and customize their own tests. We have whole test platform where our students can go and look at different tests and order them on themselves. We're our own best guinea pigs. I've been testing on myself and my poor family. They get a test kit and they're stalking every year. I'm like, time to poop in a cup, let's test, let's look at ourselves so that we can learn and we can explain it to, other people. And I think that we need to have a lot more evaluation about nutrition and how our bodies are utilizing these different nutrients.
Yeah. Okay. So $300, that's not exactly cheap, but this is where you need to look at something and not look at the cost, but look at the value. You know what I mean? Like I just upgraded my iPhone from the 13 to the 15 a few days ago. I don't notice the difference. It probably costs at least that much to trade my old one in and get my new one. That difference could have given me way more information that would be much more actionable and usable.
Totally. Get it done. I'll look at it. I'd love to see what your nutrient test comes back with. And, that way you can start to see how things are working for you as an individual, because you're different than Bob and Joe and Frank and everybody else who's doing it. You have a very unique bio-individual landscape and different genetic predispositions than other people. The way your microbiome is, what's in it depends on how you're going to metabolize some of these different nutrients. So we're all very different. And so it's, the herd mentality of getting caught up in some of these diets without kind of cross-referencing with some, some objective data is important. So yeah, test.
Yeah. Cool. I really appreciate that. I love that. Well, okay, Mrs. Adrenal Fatigue, you are always working on something. You told me offline, I'm not sure if you're allowed to talk about it, but you told me offline you might be working on a new writing project, maybe a book. Are you able to talk at all about that?
Yeah, what we're working on right now is, after 15 years of practicing and researching and writing and teaching on these topics, books are a great way to get information out to the masses. It's why I like being a journalist. So, you could meet with a nutritionist and, it costs $250 a pop, or you can read a book for $25. And I'd rather reach a lot more people with some of this information that's low hanging fruit and sort of we talked about this a little bit, but our job is to sort of translate the research into recipes. So we can make nutrition as complicated as we want it to be, but ultimately we need to get person A to eat the food that we want. And a lot of people have addictions. So they're food addictions, or they have sadness or stress or trauma in their life and they eat to compensate. So really what we have to do is it's a rehab program. So it's metabolic rehab. And that's what we have to do is we have to look at it where, we see it with phone addiction. We literally have to, and this is why I loved working for Outward Bound and doing these cancer retreats. When you remove people from their environment and you put them in an immersion area where they're living and breathing and eating and doing what we want them to do, that is where the change happens. We need inpatient rehab programs for these people with their diets, because this food is addicting. It has been designed to be that way. We don't need anyone else to tell us that processed food is bad. We know. So let's stop talking about that. This is bad. This is bad. This is bad. Let's start talking about, back in the 50s, there was the campaign with Popeye, the Sailorman. This was fascinating. So, Popeye was awesome. He had everyone eat, spinach. Oh, spinach makes Popeye strong. Well, they did studies after that, and they found that spinach was listed as the third favorite food for kids in the United States at that time. So the power of marketing, the power of putting some of these good foods on a pedestal. I mean, could you imagine if Taylor Swift just started talking about broccoli? Everyone would be eating broccoli, or everyone would be eating wild caught salmon or pasture raised beef, or some of these really healthy foods. Let's get people talking about, anyway, so I'm going off on a tangent. Yes. So we're working on the metabolic rehab program book right now and trying to get it so that it's actionable for people. It's a workbook. It's getting people educated on food quality, food sources, dispelling this plant-based diet's getting lots of traction and it's really dangerous. And we need people to understand why it's dangerous and why they do need animal protein, at least a small portion of it in their diet for their immune system. One of the chapters is pandemic proof protein. I mean, protein, energy, malnutrition, PEM is one of the biggest known proven causes to immunodeficiency. And now we're telling people to eat peas. No, this is insanity. So we really need to focus on the importance of animal protein from a nutritional biochemistry perspective, so that people can, there's so many myths out there about what to eat and what not to eat, and everyone's so confused, and it's unfair because people get diagnosed and they're like, what should I eat? Should I be plant-based? Should I be keto? Should I be carnivore? Should I be, and then we're afraid of the oxalates and spinach. Like, oh my gosh, people don't know what to do, so they're like, excuse me, they're fuck it, I'm just gonna eat whatever because I don't know, it's all scary. So yeah, it's so just kind of putting together just some basic things for people to do. And
yeah, I love that. I've heard you talk about recently, like finding 3 viable breakfast options, find 3 viable lunch options. You don't need to make tons and tons of different recipes. Find a few. Keep it that simple. You're not going to get sick of a few different recipes. Like, that's fine.
The average person eats 2 different breakfasts. The average person, and they love it. People are like, give me 2 options. Give me 2 of this, 2 of this. You get a cookbook and you're like, I don't even know where to start. It's just basic things. So finding a recipe, it's like, hey, what do you like? You like eggs and kale, great breakfast. Take your vitamin D at the same time, because the vitamin K and the kale is going to help the vitamin D absorption. Like, it's this beautiful breakfast, working with what people like, but let's keep it simple. It doesn't need to be that complex. People just need to eat it. It needs to be fast. It needs to be yummy. Does it need to be like secrets in the sauce, man? If it tastes good and there's a creamy, awesome, delicious sauce on it, people will just about anything. So some really simple, accessible recipes, because that's the other hard thing. Someone gets diagnosed with cancer and they're, maybe they were the one that did all the cooking, and now they're expecting the caregiver to make a dietary change. The best results happen when everyone in the group does it together, so you're like, hey, everybody, we're all going to have this for breakfast. We're all going to have this for dinner, so that the one person isn't isolated eating their own healthy dinner in a different room. Forget that. That's not going to help. So we need to be able to make it a group and a team and a movement, and really simple. And it needs to taste good, because if it doesn't taste good, people aren't going to eat it. And we are having more and more kids diagnosed with cancer, which is really sad. And we have, different types of issues that we're dealing with. So this food has to taste good to kids. So I do testing on like my family, who are like, they're not the healthiest, but if they taste good to them, then it passes, the family test. So it can't be just dry, cardboardy stuff.
Yeah, I love that. That's such great advice. Jess, this has been such a fun conversation. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Oh, yeah. Probably the best spot is going to be the Oncology Nutrition Institute.com. We have a newsletter that we put out. We've got some free and low fee little bite-sized courses that people can check out online. The link to the quiz, the terrain quiz from our book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancers, right on there. So if people want to just jump on and do a quick terrain assessment, that is a great tool. We also on the website have this awesome tool that has been a dream of mine for a long time, where people can calculate their basal metabolic rate, enter, their height, their weight, and then get sort of a breakout of carbs, protein, fat, some calories, so some macronutrients on a ketogenic diet. It's a really awesome calculator. I personally am excited about it. Maybe no one else is, but it's a cool tool. That's on the website. I have to be honest, I don't like social media. I think it's a big contributor. Well, we know it's a big contributor to a lot of the mental health stuff we're seeing, especially in the pediatric population. So I'm not super active on social media, but I am on LinkedIn. So if people want to I'm not a very good jibber jabber online, but LinkedIn I'm on. So, and we have a Facebook page and stuff. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, great. We will link to all of that in the show notes. Taylor Swift, we know you're out there. We know you listen to Boundless Body Radio. Start endorsing broccoli. Come on, get on it.
Broccoli, baby. Let's do it. It would change the landscape of health in the United States. So.
Amazing. Jess Higgins Kelley, thank you so very much for your work. It's something that's very near and dear to both of our hearts, and really appreciate all the hard work you put into this. So thank you so very much for everything you do, and thank you for coming on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, Casey. Your podcast is amazing. I'm honored to have been a guest. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the kind words. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.